Welcome to
Wow.
the Weigel show, right when our emails ding. Gretchen
Yeah.
Carlson joining us. How are you, Gretchen?
Actually, I was just going to put on my do not disturb so that we don't have that
Perfect.
happen. In the world of Zoom, we figured out all these ways to try to, not have interruptions, right?
It's
It's
really
great
nice.
to be with you.
Yeah, wonderful to have you, and thank you for making time because I know you've got so much going on. If you've been living under a rock and you don't know who Gretchen Carlson is, you need to get this book, Be Fierce. 3 years ago, it changed my life when I read it, and I've been revisiting it. Of course, known for shining a flashlight on bad behavior with Roger Ailes and the harassment that you endured over decades of a career. Myself, as a woman journalist and 25 years under my belt in every radio and TV station here in Chicago, not on a national platform, but here locally, have endured, and I've written publicly about this, a lot of really inappropriate behavior. And I am so grateful, as everyone says to you, you're so brave, and people are so grateful for you taking a stand and being an advocate for other people who are afraid to do the same, and especially men and bystanders who watch this happen. This is major, and you are still banging the drum. And I want to know what you're up to today, especially with liftourvoices.org. So talk to us about what you're up to today, Gretchen.
I know. Well, listen, fixing sexual harassment in the workplace is a tangled web. So my husband often jokes with me, how can you be more busy now than when you were doing a live national cable news show every single day? And I'm like, because I'm trying to fix this entire thing. So I really have like 8 full-time jobs now. So I would just put them into buckets, really. My advocacy work, I've been on the Hill trying to pass legislation to stop silencing women in the workplace through arbitration clauses. That's how companies have been able to put us into secrecy instead of going in front of a jury. They push us into arbitration, basically muzzling us. So I've been working to pass a bill. Then my other side of my advocacy is liftourvoices.org, which I formed just last December to sort of serve as an umbrella organization to not only get rid of arbitration, but also non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, which is the second mechanism that we use to silence women and men in the workplace. So we are, wow, we got a question on the debate stage about NDAs back in January, which was huge. We've had a lot of victories so far. We're in a major fundraising push right now because so many people want to help us, but we have to hire people, executive directors and such. So that's my advocacy work right now, which is like 2 full-time jobs. Then I started working as a special contributor for People TV just last month. And so I'm back to doing what I love, my craft that I too have put in more than 25 years on. And then this week I started my own daily news podcast at quakemedia.com/Gretchen, where it's just 10 minutes and it's the headlines you need to know with no bias, straight down the middle. This is something that I really wanted to do because so many people are wondering, where can they just get the facts? And so that's what I'm up to. I'm a mom. I'm a mom of 2 teenage kids, one of whom is going to college next year. So may know how that goes and all the work that goes into that. I know I'm forgetting a bunch of other stuff that I'm doing. I serve on boards and the like, but those are my sort of 3-4 main buckets.
And so your children are what, 15, 17, 16,
They
18?
are. They're 15, 17, 10th grade, 12th grade. Luckily, knock on wood, they're still in school right now,
Right.
which has been a blessing.
That's amazing. And you have inspired them. And I know through what you went through, you gave your daughter, you write about this and you've spoken about this, the strength. And my son is 14. And I think one of the main ways that we can change this culture, and it really is, it's a culture. It is an absolutely accepted behavior that goes all the way to the top where they are protecting the perpetrators over and over. It doesn't matter if the boss is a woman or a man. It is a safer way to go to protect your own and make the squeaky wheel say you don't have a sense of humor, you gotta just deal with it, get over it, move on.
Right.
All these things that you experience, that many women out there who are listening and watching have experienced, and some men as well. We don't want to discount the men in their journey, but it's so interesting to me how you write about this pivot point, and one of your male friends who had lost his wife, talking about how at 49 years old, he experienced a pivot point, which is where you can either keep going the course exactly as you have, or you can make that sharp right or left turn and go about things differently. And it happened for him late in life. It's happened for many people later in life. I'm sure you didn't expect to be going through a pivot point when
No.
you decades under your belt as a successful journalist. So how would you encourage anybody out there watching this to sort of embrace, I mean, we're going through so much right now with the virus, with the election. How can we embrace our pivot point?
Yeah, well, it's not like in my lifetime of putting things on my resume that I thought I was going to add poster child for sexual harassment in the workplace.
Right.
I mean, that's not something you aspire to. What I would credit, though, since you're in Chicago, my mom grew up in Chicago. I grew up in Minnesota. I credit my Midwestern upbringing.
Yeah.
I credit the Midwestern sensibilities, as I call them now, living in New York City, that I hold on to near and dear. That this sort of hard-working ethic that you never ever give up, no matter what is in front of you.
Yeah.
And so my life has worked in mysterious ways. You know, I started as a kid as a concert violinist. I was going to be a lawyer. I ended up in TV. I became Miss America. What?
I remember that, by the way, Gretchen. I was literally watching you play that violin. Weren't you wearing a green dress?
Yeah. The
Okay.
black with green accents, but very, very good.
God, sorry, I remember green because I was watching that in my little tiny Sony TV and thinking, hot damn, a beautiful woman with an incredible talent, because a lot of these women just answered the question with the Vaseline in their teeth. And anyway,
Right.
I totally remember you. Sorry to interrupt. Go on.
No, but it was like life works in mysterious ways, right? I mean, I grew up a tomboy. I struggled with my weight my whole life. Like, I'm short. The idea that that would be a part of my life, it's only because of my talent that I got into that and the scholarship dollars that I earned. But then I got into a career of TV. Like, you never expect that you're going to be in a toxic work environment. So for me, it was when this happened to me and I decided to jump off the cliff and decided to be the one to speak up. I didn't know what was going to happen the next minute versus the next day.
Right.
But I knew that I knew pretty quickly
Mhm.
that I was not alone. And there were millions of women out there going through the same thing. And I knew I had to help them.
Yeah.
And that's when my hard work ethic kicked in again. And I'm like, okay, I got to do something about this.
Right.
And therefore, 4 years later, you know, I think we've made massive progress. We have a lot more to do, but we've made tremendous progress because cultural shifts just don't happen quickly.
No, it's like trying to make a barge do a sharp left turn. You know, it kind of has to go like that. The PT boats can pivot like this.
Ah,
This is a barge. We're talking the Titanic trying to go that way. And
no, but it's interesting because actually this pivot, not only my own personal life, but the pivot for companies to eradicate this is actually easy. It's educating them about how to do the pivot, but the actual changing the system is not that tough. It's getting rid of NDAs and arbitration, and then it's changing the way we approach women who come forward. So we kind of operate on this old school way and don't dare to pivot. We operate that a woman comes forward, okay, she's the troublemaker, let's shut her up, let's protect the predator. No, what should happen is that the buck stops at the top. So the leader has already said to the company that I don't tolerate this, right?
right.
So the woman comes forward. Now she's actually celebrated because she had the courage to come forward. An independent investigation is done. Guess what? When the results come back and she's vindicated, because 99% of the time they are, because who else would come forward unless they're telling the truth, she gets to stay working. That's all that women want to do, by the way.
Right.
We want to stay working and we want to have an apology. Okay, now you don't need to have settlements, NDAs, this whole big business that everyone else has thrived on except for the women who come forward, and you get rid of the predator. It's not that tough.
Right.
It's educating companies to make that pivot, which is the hard part.
And a lot of that education is about the narcissist behavior. I mean, one of the things that goes on, as you know, and as many people out there know, I myself know, the narcissism of a lot of these perpetrators. There's the gaslighting that goes on. And Google that one, everybody, if you haven't heard of it, because you might be dealing with it in your family, in your life, in your relationships. But they try to make you feel crazy. And then they get all the other coworkers around to try to side against you. And then, oh, look at this is happening. And then you start to feel like you're literally losing your mind. And the PTSD that goes on. I mean, I can't tell you how many panic attacks or had to pull over on the highway because I was like, I couldn't catch my breath, because you start to think you're just a little crazy when it's slowly picking away at your brain like an ice pick. And then you go, no, this isn't okay. But because it's been culturally accepted, I mean, my mom was in this business in the 80s and she went up against her bosses with this, and they said it's his word against yours, sorry. So she finally eventually walked away and told me, pick my battles. And just recently a memory popped up on Facebook when all this was happening 3 years ago. Your book was coming out, the Me Too movement was beginning, the Weinstein stuff was all kind of getting up, shined a light upon, right? And I had posted something and it came up and I'm like, wow, it's the exact same. And remembering, if you see something, say something. All these
Yes.
bystanders sit there and they're so afraid of losing their job. They don't want to ruffle feathers. You have to speak up. You have to teach your children, because you have a mother and you might have a sister and you probably have a daughter. It requires action on your part too as a bystander, doesn't it?
Well, this is a huge part of my message to companies, is that they have to change the way in which they train their employees to encourage bystanders to come forward. The same thing I just said about celebrating a woman. It's just as tough to find the courage as a bystander. And I write about it in my book, as you point out, in Be Fierce, that some of these men who did come to women's defense, what happened to them? They were promptly blacklisted, demoted, and fired. But now things are changing. Listen, if we can get into the ear of company leaders and let them know that they need to change the way that they're doing training, they need to change the way that they're handling these cases, that will encourage bystanders to come forward. It is a key to solving this whole thing, and specifically with men, because men tend to be a lot of the bystanders. And if they go along with the jokes and the behavior, they're just promulgating the whole problem. But if they actually can find the guts, like if Billy Bush had found the guts with the Donald Trump tape,
Right.
to
Right.
say, I'm not going to tolerate that. I mean, I'm not saying it would have changed President Trump's behavior for anyone else, but it would have changed it in that moment. And it would have let him know that Billy Bush was not going to allow that. Now, Billy Bush has had a metamorphosis, and I applaud him for coming full circle and realizing that what he did was wrong.
Right.
And that's part of the process. But yes, it's so much a part of education, and companies not thinking that this is just a passing fad, Jenniffer. I can't tell you how many times that I've heard that, but now look where we are. You know, first we had this movement for women.
Right.
Then we had the school kids speaking up after the Parkland shooting. I believe that these are all parallel movements. Then you had BLM.
Right.
And for the first time as a nation, we're actually discussing, maybe this time these movements stick. Maybe this time they don't go away and we don't just do lip service to it, but we actually make change. And I see that happening as somebody who's inherently involved in it on a daily basis.
Yes. And the other thing too, a lot of people might complain about what's going on politically, but I have interviewed so many people who say, you know, hey guys, this actually has to happen. The pendulum has to swing so far in one way to initiate all this change. It's like popping a zit. You got to get the pus out. And look what we're doing. You know, we're changing archetypes in the slave master, as Carolyn Mace calls it, the archetype with Black Lives Matter. We're, you know, putting light into this archetype of harassment, that, again, a slave master kind of a thing. And the fear that goes on with people being afraid to speak their truth because they're worried about the repercussions as a result. And I mean, your case, so publicly knowing that you got an apology, which is outstanding, you got a nice settlement, but a lot of people, as you write about, walk away losing their job with less than 50 grand. It's not a big moneymaker publicity stunt here. It is about doing the right thing. So to those people out there that might not have had the fanfare and the wonderful accolades that they were doing the right thing, and feel like maybe they just lost the wind in their sails, what would you say to them to help keep them going?
This is why I'm doing the work.
Yeah.
Listen, I'd love to get out of my NDA. I've demanded that Fox let me out of my NDA because now the movement has gone to the next level, which is to let women out of their NDAs, right? Had I known that when I signed my settlement, I would have never signed on to an NDA, but how could I have known that we would create this movement, right? But here we are in the next step. I'm doing this for all the other women and men out there who don't have the platform that I had or the resources that I have. The number one thing they have said to me is, thank you for being a voice for the voiceless. They felt like nobody gave a flying you know what about them. And guess what? They were right. Nobody ever did, including the media. Right. But now, you know, I am doing this to change the American workplace for forever. This will be my greatest achievement in my life. This will be the number one thing on my resume. If I can pass this legislation, if through Lift Our Voices, I can eradicate NDAs, those two things alone will dramatically change the American workplace for forever. Now you add in also educating young boys, which is essential, and continuing to elevate our young girls. But this work I'm doing, Jenniffer, is not for Gretchen Carlson. I'd love to get out of my NDA, but this is not specifically about me. This is about the fast food worker in New Orleans. This is about the hotel worker in Las Vegas. This is about the nursing home worker in upstate Minnesota.
Right.
These
Right.
people don't have the voice that I have, and they don't have the means. They gotta sign that NDA when they fire them because they're pregnant, which is illegal, or they
Right.
fire them because they were, sexually harassed and they spoke up because they need the 2 weeks paycheck.
Right.
And in order to get it, they have to sign the NDA. That's
Right.
not the way America's supposed to work. Now, I want to be clear, Jennifer, that I'm not saying we should eradicate NDAs for company secrets,
Okay.
like real ones, like the
Right.
McDonald's
Trade
recipe,
secrets, all that stuff. Yes.
all
Yes.
that stuff. I'm talking about toxic workplace issues. And what companies have done is they've taken advantage of the laws on the books,
Right.
and they've used them to cover their dirty laundry. So
Hmm.
whether it's discrimination or harassment or assault or whatever it is, they have been able to use the laws to their advantage to make it look like they are pristine.
Right.
And it's the one reason why the American public got so pissed off when all these stories started coming out, because they were like, why have we not heard about these? We thought we had solved this in this generation. It's because companies have been putting them into secrecy. That's why. And
Mhm.
so you weren't hearing about the stories until my lawyers luckily came up with a very avant-garde move to be able to get past my arbitration clause, to make it public.
Right.
So, like I said, there's a lot of tentacles here at work, but I'm ginned up every day knowing that I think we're making a tremendous amount of progress.
How have you been coping with your wonderful kids and family with COVID? I mean, this has got to be, I mean, you're talking about both of us are working from home here. We got to make sure everyone silences for our conversation. But how are you hanging in there with everything that's going on in our current landscape?
You know what? I've been underestimated my whole life, and I have to say that I underestimated my own kids as far as how they would be able to handle this part of my life story. I mean, they were my paramount concern when I jumped off the cliff, as any mother would say.
Sure.
They were, 4 years ago, they were 13 and 11.
Right.
And I mean, my gosh, just social media alone for them. And then you throw this on them. I wondered how their friends would make fun of them, or if they would embrace them. And I underestimated them because, as I wrote in my book, I shared that story about my daughter taking on bullies and saying, "Mommy, I did it because I saw you do it."
Right.
And if that was all that I accomplished
Hmm.
from coming forward for my kids, it would be enough. Another story that happened to my son that happened after my book came out was that I was on a CNN town hall one night about harassment. And I came home from out of town, and he was waiting for me in the kitchen. And he said, "Mom, is that true what that other woman said on TV with you tonight? Is it true, Mommy, that once every 73 seconds that a woman in our country is assaulted or harassed? Is that true, Mom?"
Mm.
And I had to look at him and say, "I am so sorry to tell you that that is true." And he looked at me with tears in his eyes and he said, "Mom, as a young man, I want to do my part to change that."
Wow. You've raised a good one in that Christian.
Well,
Goodness.
listen, he learned that.
Right.
He learned that, and I hugged him so hard,
Yeah.
because that is how change happens. And so how are they doing in COVID? They're surviving because they've seen, I hope, an example of surviving. My husband's also a great role model for them. And I just want them to stay in school, because obviously that's just so much better than trying to do the remote thing.
Right.
They're good.
That's great. And too, with everything that happens at home, our kids are so sponges and they're absorbing all of it, and you're proof of that. And your daughter told you that, and your son told you that. My son's 14. And if we think for a second they're not listening to every conversation that takes place, I recently had a milestone birthday, and a family friend said, "Let's go around the table and say what, how Jen's helped you." And you're kind of like, "Oh God, what's my son going to say in this one?" And I'm going to cry when I say it, but he said, "My mom has had a lot of different things go on, and every one that she faces, she finds a solution and keeps going." And
Oh.
I hope I can be like that. I'm paraphrasing what he said because I was like crying so much into my mastacholi, I couldn't even keep it
Uh,
straight. But the point is that if we stand strong and do what we know to be right, I mean, at the end of the day, we all know what right and wrong is.
we
And if
do.
you found a loophole to get, away with something, karmically, I believe there is something that will take place. It might not be on the public eye or in the stand where everybody sees you on the stage, but it happens because cause and effect, with every cause, there is an effect. And what we
Mhm.
choose to put out there matters. And I love what Jake said, about, fathers who raise feminists because they have daughters. That's a very important statement right there. We can all make a difference, whether we're an uncle or a parent or
Yes,
whatever it is. You know, they're watching our every move.
they are. And of course, that's Jake Tapper at CNN who,
Yes, yes. Which
you
I
know,
love that you all are friendly because, one
yeah.
always thinks that like, oh no, they never have a conversation. They were on the opposite side of the dial.
No, no, no. One of the most wonderful things that's happened since I left that experience was that I've had the ability to actually sample watch all of my friends and colleagues because I have the ability to just channel surf, and I've had great respect for the work that they're doing. And quite honestly, up until now, getting back into the daily news business, I've been kind of satisfied not being in the melee.
Sure, absolutely.
It's gotten so hyper partisan and so angry and so hateful, and that's just not Minnesota nice where I come from. And
No, no.
it's just not. And so
And it's
um
not information either. It's not
it's not
useful information.
information.
Yeah,
It's screaming and shouting. And, while opinion TV was brilliant at its inception,
yeah.
because it was right, at the time when people were getting their news already at work through digital means. And so when they came home at night, to have the ability to see opinion was brilliant to start that. But now it's just turned into absolute craziness. And people only watch what they want to hear. And so we're like operating in two, I won't even use the word cult, but there I did. I used the word cult. I mean, we're operating in so far right and so far left that there's no compromise. And I'm just a huge believer in compromise and coming together. So I'm hopeful that, I mean, that's how I wake up every morning. I'm like, I'm hopeful that we can find compromise. When I go to bed at night, I'm hopeful we can find compromise. And it's why I wanted to get back into the news and just do it straight down the middle.
Do you still have struggles with perfectionism? You write about that very honestly.
Well, I say I'm a reformed perfectionist.
Yes, yes, good.
I tried to accomplish that when I was 40. I didn't do very well. I mean, I also tried to say no to more things, and I still always said, yes for the most part.
Right.
I actually was fired from Fox 2 days after I turned 50, so that was a big happy birthday. Um, yeah, and so I have gotten much better in these last 4 years, because after I did what I did, like, who the hell cares what anyone thinks about me?
Right.
Like, who the hell cares that I'm trying to still be perfect? No, that's a demon in our lives. For any woman out there listening or watching,
Mhm.
they set us up socially, they raise us culturally to be perfectionists. And when I saw my daughter color outside of the lines for the first time when she was little and crumple up the paper and throw it away, I said, no. I
Right.
said, we are getting that piece of paper out of the garbage and you are going to continue. I love how that looks. We
Ah,
have to stop socializing our girls to be so perfect, because what do you do when you're trying to be, what do you not do when you're trying to be perfect?
fail.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Fail or take risks. And
Risk
so, so
Yes, yes.
consequently, boys, young men,
Mhm.
they go for a promotion at work when they're only 10% sure that they're actually qualified.
Right,
Women, they don't go for a promotion until they're 90% sure that they're qualified.
right,
You have to, I always advise women, even though I come from Minnesota, stop being so damn nice.
right, right,
Stop it now.
right.
Sit in the front of the room, raise your hand,
Mhm.
get a seat in the boardroom. By I know your heart beats out of control when you're that person,
Yeah,
but you got to do it. You got to speak up, you got to stand up. And then we need men to help us too, which is a whole nother part of the equation.
exactly. That's a whole other conversation. But being fierce, as you say in the book, but also pushing the bold button. Carolyn Mace, great author, dear friend of mine, when things kind of took a left turn for me, she literally said, it's time to push the bold button. And that means just be your own advocate and speak your truth. And if you're coming from a place of truth and honesty, you will turn out on the right side of this. And the right versus the wrong, meaning knowing you are doing what was true in your heart, what you felt from a character standpoint was the right thing to do. And I think that's where we go with our compass of, oh, is this right? Is this wrong? I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to take a risk. Sometimes taking the risk when it might be wrong to others because it is ruffling feathers. We're back at the pivot point, right? Taking that pivot and seeing how you can create an entirely new pathway. It's like brains and PTSD, which I know you write a lot about, which women who experience this have. We can create new pathways in our brain. They're incredibly malleable. They just have to hear that tone, whatever that is, that meditation that creates it. The tipping point can happen and we can
Yeah.
heal ourselves.
And back to what you said about, what should women do if they're really at a crossroads right now? I know how scary it is, because literally, if you come forward, then you know that you will be maligned, right? And you're probably going to lose your profession. I think the scariest stat out there, and it's unscientifically proven because nobody has done research on this, which I hope to do through my organization, is how many women actually have been sidelined in their professional careers because of this. We don't really know, although I'm going to tell you it's thousands, it might be millions, because of all the women who've reached out to me, one thing's for sure. They have never worked in their chosen profession ever again after coming forward. And that is outrageous to me. That is outrageous that as a nation, we are okay with that. And that's why I'm shining a light on this. And that's why I know how scary it is for women to come forward and say anything. But I would leave this quote with them, which is my favorite one. It happens to be anonymous. One woman can make a difference, but together we rock the world.
Yeah.
And we've seen one woman's voice make a difference, whether it's my story, whether it's the Google walkout. That was one woman's idea turned into an international day. And guess what they were protesting? Payouts to predators and arbitration clauses in employment contracts. And guess what Google changed the next day? They took out arbitration clauses. So one woman's voice does matter. And so as scary as it is, you know, go to my book, chapter 4, pull that playbook out of the book and put it in your back pocket. Gather evidence. Make sure you have evidence.
Power. Information is power.
Yes. You have to have evidence because it still is he said, she said, tell somebody so that you have witnesses and seek outside counsel. Don't go to HR right away. You have to seek outside counsel. And there are organizations like betterbrave.com that will link you to an attorney for free for women who cannot afford that. It's just essential that you do your research before you decide to make the move.
Absolutely, because by gathering that, you have your own toolkit. Like you said, chapter 4 in this is pretty darn helpful. And gretchencarlson.com is where you can find out more about Gretchen. Liftourvoices.org. Always looking for donations right now for help to do research, or you're applying for grants. I know that there's so much to be done here. If you're out there and you're listening and you're watching this right now and you really want to make a difference and you can write a check, you need to do it. Go to liftourvoices.org. And also tune into Gretchen's information because it's unbiased information that are headlines that you need to know to get out the door without being afraid to leave your house. So this is huge. Follow Gretchen on all of her socials. Am I leaving anything out, Gretchen? Thank you so much for your energy, your time, and all the hard work you're doing.
I really appreciate the opportunity to connect with you. I mean, we're sisters in this movement. We've both experienced things in our life. And dogs.
My dog barking because
my dog. And we have to have levity because that's what keeps us going. But I just want to let you know that I appreciate your sincerity in sharing your stories with me, those that you can tell, and that we're in this together and we're making a difference. And almost every woman has a story. So listen, there's a lot of us out there.
That's right. Tell the stories. That's right. You need to be heard, every single one of us. Gretchen, have a wonderful rest of the day. I hope we can stay in touch. Oh, shoot. We didn't even talk about Jody Norgard and all of that wonderful stuff. So let's have another chat, shall we?
We will. Jody's a great woman. Love her.
She's wonderful. My dog is having a grand old time. Can you hear her? My rescue dog. Oh.